We're here for another journey. This time around, the guest, Matt Kean. Pleased to meet you, Matt.
Thanks, Kevin.
So we start these journeys, because I know you've got a fair story to tell and you're on a bit of a campaign and a mission at the moment from your own personal situation, but we start with these stories around how have you ended up being in Albury, Wodonga? What's your ties to the area?
We, my family, my wife and my two girls, we've been here 5 years in July. So I made the move for work, principalship at Holy Spirit in Lavington. So I moved from sunny Hobart. So
it's, I think we get the 4 seasons, don't we? A little bit better than Hobart, or is it similar?
You have the 4 seasons in one day in Hobart. The big change for us is winter's not too dissimilar, except for the icy cold winds off the Southern Ocean and Mount Wellington. But summer's a different beast completely. You can get your occasional day in the high 30s in Hobart, but up here when it's 40 plus for 5 days in a row, it does sap us.
Now, we often talk about what it is you do for a living. You've mentioned there the principal of a school locally, so you've come here for that work. But you're also getting known in our community for, let's talk about this mission, I guess, that you've discovered around melanoma awareness.
Yeah, so essentially in the process of us being awarded the job in September of 2016, so we had to make the decision as a family, do we sell our house, do we rent it out? Bad decision to not rent it out, given the property market everywhere in Australia. But we decided to sell the house. In the process of a working bee with my mates to look at the backyard, we worked all day and I noticed this nasty lump on my leg, which ended up being melanoma, and that started the ball rolling. So we should have moved in December or late December of 2016, but we had to postpone the move till the July of 2017.
So outside of that, relatively healthy, normal active lifestyle?
Yeah, no, so I suppose you're stereotypical. I spent time in the sun, growing up in Hobart, which is ironic. I didn't know enough about melanoma awareness at the time. Spent a lot of time outdoors playing sport, bike riding, running, swimming, and really didn't probably take it as seriously as I should have. Mm-hmm. And that's why now I suppose I'm really passionate in this area.
So when you talk about the surprise, I guess, of the lump, was it something like a mole or something identifiable as what we traditionally all think melanoma might present as? Or?
It was just above my knee on my right leg. It was a relatively nasty black lump that appeared out of nowhere. So I can't recall seeing it there, and it appeared, and I was quite blasé. I actually left it there for a month. I assumed I'd been bitten in the garden that day. And as guys do, we're incredibly good at saying it'll be right, it happens to other people. And unfortunately, it didn't happen to other people. So I was out in the boat a month later with my father, who looked at me with a look of despair of asking me what on earth's on my leg. And I said, I don't know, Dad, I think I've been bitten. So under his guidance, I went to the doctor a day later, and then the ball started rolling. It was cut out. The biopsy came back that it was cancer. And at that point in time, I still didn't think it was that serious. Then I had a biopsy of my lymph nodes, which had shown the fact that it actually spread there as well. So that then essentially became the stage 3 melanoma.
So from there, obviously a bit of an awakening and a disruption, as you said, for sort of several months there to try to move to where we are now. What did you learn, or what did you find around you, I guess, in terms of support and things like that?
I suppose our first thing we had to do, we'd sold the house, which was our aim. We had to then, upon that diagnosis of stage 3, had to ring the office in Wagga, the Catholic Education Office, and say, I'm not coming yet. I had to ring the Catholic Education Office in Hobart and say, we're not moving now. We had to find a house to live, and we had to tell the girls that we weren't moving. My youngest was quite distressed. She'd have to give her presents back to her friends that she was leaving. She was only in prep in Tassie, which is kinder here. Yep. But our eldest daughter put 2 and 2 together and realised that black lump was cancer. So the emotional journey was probably as hard as the physical journey, and we spent 6 months in Hobart and went from there, and then got the all clear, or there was no more cancer spreads, and then made the move to Albury. But the support was unbelievable. I can't fault anyone. The support from the office in Hobart, Wagga, our friends and family, was astronomical.
And I guess it's a fortunate story where you've been fit and able enough post that to be able to go on a fundraise and achieve some pretty physical sort of achievements as well personally. Let's talk through some of those in terms of bike rides and different bits and pieces.
And I suppose the story didn't end there either.
Yeah.
It was a routine scan in November of 2017, just after arriving, that it became stage 4, which then, I suppose, then really spread that we were given a time frame. We were told by the oncologist at that point in time, if the immunotherapy treatment works, that I should get 8 to 10 years, so the prospect of not seeing my 50th birthday, or the girls grow up, or etc. But the positive on that news was 7 years earlier, I'd have been planning a funeral. Hence the advancement in technology, etc. So I hang my hat on that technology moving forward, and what difference I can make to other people. I was naive, and I want other people to know that this is preventable. This is a disease that only gets impacts by the sun. And if we can change our practice in the sun, as individuals, as a country, we're going to be far better off.
So it's as much about fundraising and challenging yourself physically and I guess taking the most out of life each day as what it is around the awareness for others to not take for granted and make sure they're doing the right thing in the sun.
Yep. And through the couple of things I've done a walk and I've just finished a bike ride. The fundraising is important, but the awareness is more important, because if we raise the awareness, we won't need to fundraise as much. Yes, melanoma is still going to impact Australia, but the prevention's the big key. And it doesn't take that much. It's not rocket science. Yes, the science is, and what the oncologists and what the pathologists have done here in Australia and the world is astronomical. But it's about every person taking responsibility when they're a son, as parents looking after your kids. Teenagers are one of my target audiences because they're bulletproof. I've got a teenage daughter who it'll never happen to her, even though she knows my story. So if we can get into the minds and the heads of every single Australian, it's going to help our economy, it's going to help our emotional, it's going to help our well-being.
So what have you learnt in terms of that, how preventable it is? What is the advice that you're spreading the word of?
Oh, as simple as, your five sun safeties. When I was growing up, and Sid the Seagull's 40 this year, the slip, slop, slap, and I grew up the slip, slop, slap, but now we've got the extra 2, Esser and Seek Shade, and also the slide on the sunnies. If we can follow those, we can't go wrong. The UV, there's a downloadable app on our phones. Everyone has a phone these days. Teenagers have phones. If we've got that UV app and use that as our Bible, we can't go wrong. I never worried about it. Living in Tassie, people make the assumption that it's an overcast day, it's December, it's 17 degrees, it's grey. They're the days that I probably got myself into trouble. Days like today, it's overcast, the UV's still 3, the sun's still doing damage. Living in Queensland, yes, it's the highest rate of melanoma, but people are aware when they go to Queensland. It's these days here in the Riverina and Tassie and in Victoria where we get ourselves into trouble.
Yeah, so I guess where to from here? I've seen people like Deborah Hutton, as recently as the last few days, has gone out and done a substantial national sort of campaign. Is that something that you're hoping to sort of, I guess, duplicate and replicate at a more localised level?
I think it takes people like Deborah Hutton who have got that the national profile, but every little bit helps. I figure every time I do a school visit, school talk or presentation, this podcast, if 2 people walk away from each of these and go, I need to change what I'm doing, I figure I've done my job. But it's so preventable. If we can get the national, I know it's election time at the moment and I don't want to get political, but that prevention, if we can spend more money on prevention, it's going to have a longer impact. And it might be as simple as, obviously, as a school principal, if we can do free sunscreen in schools, if we can look at sporting events and have a UV meter, done. Cricket club, spend the whole time out in the sun. My daughter's involved in water polo at the pool here in Albury, in Wodonga. If we've got a UV meter, people are aware. We actually need to put it in their faces. So those things will have long-term impacts.
What are your thoughts going through your head when you see somebody out lying in the sun and maybe sunbaking, someone younger who, as you said, sort of bulletproof and resistant? Do you ever resist an urge to go and say, hey, I've got a story to tell you?
Yes, I'm not going to lie. I live in Thaguna, and we had the redevelopment of the roundabout to the lights there at Elizabeth Mitchell Drive, and there was a gentleman there who was on the work crew who every day had his shirt off. Now, he had a very good tan, but obviously tan's just and showing the impact of what the sun can do. There was a temptation to roll down the window, but I don't think he would have appreciated that. So I think we actually need to get people, and I try and tell my story in the hope that people will take notice. We've got people like Jared Roughhead, we've got Deborah Hutton, So if that can have an impact, that's the most important thing. And if we can start early, if we can start with primary school students, secondary school students, that obviously when they have kids and having that impact.
What's that sort of done to you personally and psychologically, other than obviously the fear of it all and things at the time, the emotional roller coaster no doubt you've been through, but has it given you a better perspective or outlook on life?
I think so. I don't think I'm the same person. I'm not going to lie to you. I think in a lot of areas I've become far more resilient, but in other areas I'm not. I know the impact it's had on my wife and my girls, and I can't take that back. I wish there were moments where I could. When you're told the news that you might have 8 to 10 years, I'm not going to lie. Emotionally, I know in the lead up to my ride, I was doing school visits, and I know there was one day on the Friday afternoon after travelling around the week, it hit me emotionally. I was out on a ride and I was a bawling mess because I suppose reliving that story, which I think is really important, but yeah, it had me in a place I didn't really want to be in. So, but I think that's one of those things, the ability to talk to mates and have that support around you.
And that's it. I think that's the secondary message, isn't it? Like outside of the melanoma is you're a walking and talking advocate of opening up about your own journey and your own issues, I guess, at the moment.
Yep. So, and I suppose mental health's one of the big agendas everywhere, and I suppose having the ability to talk about it, I find me talking about the melanoma quite therapeutic, but at the same time there's a tipping point with that too. But I think we as men need to be really courageous and say, I'm not travelling well, and seeking the help we need.
I know that you're playing some sport, you're being social, you're being the school principal, you've probably got a little bit on your plate, especially with this passion project. How do you unwind? What do you do with any spare time that you have?
As I said, I did a bike ride just recently. I find that quite, I suppose the physical, I'm better mentally, the more physically fit I am. So it's the opportunity of getting out on the bike. It's really hard now because it's starting to get really cold. But I find I unwind, and putting that effort into the physical side helps me mentally. So there's one of the benefits. I mean, there's all the research that even suggests that physical exercise with cancer and the benefits that has. So it's that opportunity to get out there and also do it with friends as well.
Mm. Often ask people on the journey what their biggest achievement in life has been so far. Is yours still being here?
I think so. And I do wonder too, if I hadn't had this, and it's not a day goes by where I don't think of that month where I left it, and what would I be doing? I think some people might say that I've inspired them because I'm doing this, but I figure it's just one of those things that you work with the cards you've been dealt, and where do you go from there? If I think of every talk I do, everything, if it can make an impact on one person, so they don't have to go through that. And I say to the kids, I have to rely on technology, but if they look after themselves, you can't go wrong.
Mm. Who do you admire? Who's someone that you admire, whether it's a relative or someone just in the world that you think's made some change, or
I mean, it's a different cause, but you look at someone like Neil Danaher. I'd obviously heard of MND, but what he's been able to do for raising the impact and raising the awareness of MND, and I think we need people like that to be able to look at and say, what can we do with what we've been dealt with? Neil Danaher, mum and dad. I mean, that's always one of those things. But even my wife, what I suppose, put her through. I haven't done it deliberately, but unfortunately that's the way it is, and she's put up with a fair bit of rubbish from me over probably our whole married life, but the last 5 years has probably been incredibly difficult.
When you're searching for inspiration, you are at a low point, you might come across sort of inspirational quotes or mantras maybe you've had to apply to your life at different points in time. Have you got any favourites or good ones that sort of stick out?
I'm big on the prevention's better than a cure, which is one of those things too. Obviously training for a walk. A couple of years ago with the melanoma march, I listened to the podcast, the Howie Games. I'm a sports nut, I think, which sometimes can be detrimental. But just listening to the stories of other people, you don't realise the background behind them. You see them on the sporting field, but you get to know them. I just listened to Nick Rewalt, and his battle with his sister. He's battled to be the best he can be. And I think if we can get the best out of ourselves, no one's perfect, but it's about learning from your mistakes and the journey.
Mm. Been given any good advice over your life? Other than obviously Dad sitting there going, mate, you might want to get that checked out.
I remember when I first got diagnosed, the lady I work with in the office, she said, Matt, as much as people want you to be positive the whole time, you're allowed to turn around and go, this is actually not real good. And I tried to be the mantra of 90% on being positive, 10% not feel sorry for yourself, but be practical and go, I've been dealt a fairly decent blow. And I suppose I try and look at that too. As much as we need to be positive, they're allowed to be also down. And I think we need to be comfortable in that process of being down and then trying to get yourself back out of that hole. And allowing people to help you to get yourself out of that hole.
It's probably pretty good advice, isn't it? Because you can't keep everything at bay forever. You can only put on a brave face for so long and be positive for so long, and every now and then something does just get under that skin or strike a nerve, doesn't it?
And we talk about resilience. I mean, it's one of the key words in the world or even education. I think we're about the same age. Resilience was never mentioned when we were at school, yet we're expected to have it. We're now... we're talking about it all the time, and we're saying kids haven't got it. But look at the last 2 years with COVID. Don't get me wrong, I haven't enjoyed COVID. I don't think anyone has. But what we've learnt from COVID, I think will help us set up for the future.
What's the toughest decision you've had to make in life so far? How do you go with them?
I'd like to think I'm pretty practical about it. I think sometimes, I'm not sure. That's a good question. I don't know. I think the hardest thing we've ever done is have to tell the kids that I've been sick. But there's no use sitting down. I remember I did the talk with Year 9 students, and our oldest Ava's in Year 10 this year. So we sat her down last year and told her when she was coming out to a talk with me to Tallangatta Footy Club, she'd been at me. And so we sat her down and told her the 8 to 10 years. That's probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do.
Yeah.
We put our youngest daughter in the shower and told Ava, and just the tear that rolled down her eyes. Or cheek, sorry, not her eyes.
Yeah, rolled out of the eyes. Have you had any sliding door moments? I mean, it sounds like you sort of had the one where you could have got checked sooner, or you could have, fortunately you're here to sort of talk about it today, but...
Not necessarily, but all these little gems have come up over the journey too. The opportunity of meeting people, this has probably opened up doors to have that conversation with people that it never would have. So I'm not saying it's ever been a great thing, but it's given me a different perspective on life as well. As I said, in a lot of ways I've become far more resilient. In other ways I've become less resilient. So I do wonder what it'd be like if I didn't have the melanoma journey, but I have. So I'm not sure. It's an interesting question. Sliding doors. I was just talking to Gus outside, and I remember doing a talk at the St Pat's Cricket Club, and this day it was pouring with rain. They'd cancelled training. They were still having me along, and this little gem, the fact that the UV was still 7 at 5 o'clock that night, and I was asked by someone at the cricket club, isn't it between 11 and 3, the UV? Now, I couldn't have asked for a better day to actually go for that. I was New South Wales Cancer Council, or the Australian Cancer Council flew me to Sydney last year for the launch of the National Skin Cancer Week in Sydney, and it was pouring in early December. Now, someone said, it's really disappointing about the weather, and I said, actually, no, it's not, because these are the days that people get sunburnt, even though it's pouring. So there's those little gems that pop up now and then.
And if you had your time again, and take this back to anywhere within your journey, but would you do anything differently?
Oh, absolutely. I remember turning up to sports carnivals as a teacher in Tassie, wearing my shorts, even though it was freezing. And I came home those days, what I thought was sunburn. No, it was red raw, and I put it down to windburn, because how could you get sunburnt those days? And that's what happened. I got sunburnt because I didn't know the UV. It wasn't on the agenda. Yes, there was the app out there, but people didn't talk about it. And people still don't know the app now. So would I change what I did? Absolutely. Would we have sold the house? Probably not. We would have rented it out, but one of those things. Hobart property market, it's actually cringeworthy when you look at how much the house is worth now. But
what's the best thing that's ever happened to you?
Oh, the girls. Yep. Being a father. I'm not necessarily the greatest father in the world by my own admission, but having the opportunity to share this with them, and probably taking the risk of still moving to Albury, after the diagnosis. It was a risk. At the end of the day, we didn't know anyone. But what we've been able to do here, don't get me wrong, I miss Tassie, but it's one of those things that you've got to make life happen still.
Well, good things happen outside the comfort zone. That's one of my mottos.
Yeah,
I reckon.
absolutely.
The second you're out of the comfort, the better the things are. You spoke about your children. Think back to when you were a child. What were you going to be when you grew up?
Mum's a teacher, and my father's the most practical man I know. I didn't follow in Dad's genes. I don't have them. I can help him, but that's all I can do. But I really want to be a teacher. I think there was a 6-month period in year 11 and 12 where I didn't, but other than that, I've always wanted to be a teacher. So that was nearly a no-brainer. Straight from school, straight into uni, straight into the workforce.
Easy, living the dream. So with hindsight, and it'd be interesting because I haven't spoken to a teacher on the journey in a while, but the hindsight, you're giving kids advice every single day and trying to lead them and teach them and set them off on the right foot. What advice would you have given a younger you?
I don't think I was a straightforward student. I think most of my teachers would agree that I probably wasn't straightforward. I'd like to think I had the twinkle in the eye. I suppose it's about being your best. And when I say that is, yes, literacy and numeracy are really, really important, but we want that well-rounded person. I speak to our year sixes at school and say, okay, what impression have you made? What's your legacy going to be when you leave those gates for the last time? And I think whether it be primary school, high school, what impact have you had on those around you? And how can you make those people around you better? And that's a key figure of what we talk about with our leadership with our kids.
Tough book to write for you, I'm guessing. 5 to 10 years from now, what does the journey look like? What's happened? Have you spread the word? Have you saved some lives?
I'd like to think so. And getting into schools, that's the important thing. So not just my school, but getting that opportunity to speak to other schools. And look, to be honest with you, with the diagnosis of 8 to 10 years, that was coming up 4.5 years ago. So I'm half, if you look at it that point of view. So first, the aim is to be alive in 10 years. But with technology, etc., I'm really confident that's the case. And I suppose I'd have to talk about the journey with the family. I suppose I've done the melanoma march. I've now just done the ride. And that has to be a key component of it. I think I said to my wife originally, I don't want this disease to define me, but I feel comfortable in the fact that, yes, it will have an impact on me because I'm hoping to impact others.
Would you say you're on track to achieve your life goals?
I hope so. I think every day that someone hears the message, that's enough. I suppose in my sphere, I don't have a profile, but if those around me can actually do better in the sun, etc., draw some inspiration. For example, we decided to do a bike ride, and the fact that we set our goal for 1,000 kilometres. Some people find that inspirational, but it was fun to do as well. It was about mateship. And about trying to get it out there, trying to get the message out there. Trying
to slowly release the shackles of COVID as a part of the theme of the journey. It paused this program for some months while we couldn't all gather together and what have you, so there was a bit of a gap, and we've sort of initially discussed with people the impact psychologically, the novelty they found out of it, the good things, the bad, the ugly. I guess in sort of overview, you as a teacher, you would have had disruption. Trying to spread your message, you would have had disruption, no doubt, as well. How's it impacted you? Is it in a positive way? Has your existing life helped with resilience to be ready for something as substantial as a global pandemic?
Moving from Tassie, obviously there was a decent separation. Bass Strait's a reasonably wide border. But the impact living on the border was unbelievable. Like when we moved here, the politics of New South Wales, Victoria, and have never become more evident. But probably dealing with the school too, there was the ups and downs, and even now still. There's the teacher shortage that's hit us hard and every other school. And now all of a sudden we've got people being sick. The unis probably not. Unis across Australia aren't producing the same amount of teachers they were. Teaching is becoming harder. I'm not going to lie, it's been really hard. The at from home from learning was stressful on the teachers, students, the parents. But I think we have to get through. When I think of our Year 2 students at the moment, they don't know what a normal year at school looks like. So Year 3 is their last normal year at school, was kindergarten. But we will get through this. We have no choice, and I think that's the most important thing. We've got no choice. And I suppose the big thing in terms of the melanoma awareness, the sun didn't care about COVID. People are still getting sunburnt. The damage is being done. Less people were going to get a skin check. So essentially, yes, the numbers might have plateaued to a degree, but only because people don't know. And that's the scary thing.
Makes it more important a conversation and topic now, really, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And the more conversations we can have, the better. Because they're cheap. Actually, they're free.
Man, I want you, regardless of the outcome of today's journey and the podcast and what have you, I want you to know that you've had an impact on me because, I often say to my wife, my goodness, how much sunscreen can you apply to the kids? How often can you do that? We've left the house without 5 hats. We've got the 5 kids and I often admire how specific she is about making sure they're protected from the sun, whereas I think like you, myself, you didn't have that as a child. You might have been lucky to put a hat on. Talking to you is now changing my mind on what I do personally myself and what the kids do, and how we protect our children. So know that you've had an impact in that way straight away. And obviously the power of that for people to stop and reflect, anyone who's listening to the podcast or watching the video at the moment, the power of that to stop and reflect and think, geez, it's not really that hard. A couple of minutes to slap some things on and out you go.
And it's not. But the most important message is too, we can't wrap ourselves in cotton wool. Now, when I say that that's not an excuse for teenagers to sit inside all day. We live in one of the most glorious climates in the world. Let's take full use. If it's weather on the golf course, the cricket field, going out walking, running, whatever we're doing, we need to make sure we're doing it, but in a safe way. As I said, my daughter plays local A-grade water polo. Not for a second do I expect her to wear a rash vest in a game. But she's got zinc on her face. She's got sunscreen on her shoulders. When she's out of the pool, she's got those steps. But we can't just wrap ourselves in cotton wool. I mean, it coincided with the passing of Shane Warne. My talks in schools, talking about the fact that, yes, he admired and loved the baggy green and the iconic nature of the baggy green. But when he had the choice, he was wearing the big floppy white. They're standing out in the middle of the MCG and the UV's 10. The baggy green, now this is sacrilegious to say I know, isn't doing a lot for sun protection. So what do? So we need to put those preventative measures in. We were doing a bike ride. We're out on the bike every day. UV was well over 5 each of those days. So you don't have a broad rim helmet. So we put sunscreen on every time we stopped. I had zinc all over my face. We had the long arms. It's about prevention and using those. As I said, we can't wrap ourselves in cotton wool.
And oldie but a goodie as we start to wrap up, Matt. Able to have 3 people at a dinner party, alive or dead, who would you have?
That's a good question. And you know what? Actually, it's funny because Mark Howard on the Howie Games asked the same question. Who would I like to have? I'd like to have John McLean, he's a wheelchair athlete who's swum the English Channel. He's done the Hawaiian Ironman and finished it only once because he got turned around, hit a headwind, didn't make it. Just the inspiration of that journey. Wow. As a Catholic school principal too, Mary McKillop, just for what she had to do as an educator in a male-dominated world, and what she was able to do as an excommunicator from the church, yet then sailed to Rome, which I think is courageous. And number 3. Oh, look, this sounds really corny. I'd love my younger self to be able to then try and go through, what have you done? Like, what could you do differently? Would be fantastic. And also, Nick Rewalt, the podcast I listened to the other day, if people get an opportunity, just inspirational. What he's done and his mindset and the journey with his sister. And he's a proud Tasmanian too. So
there's a link to homeland. I like the younger you because nobody's mentioned that yet. Everyone's chosen a celebrity chef pretty much to cook the food at the table, but having your younger self would be an impressive one.
And maybe I wouldn't be here in this situation now if I had the chat to the younger me. And I suppose the important thing is I always talk about the fact that I only ever put sunscreen on for one reason, because I knew I was getting sunburnt with my pale skin. Never worried about the long-term effects. I was worried the short-term, and I only put it on because it really hurts to get sunburnt. There were the days that I didn't do it, and it was too late. So that's the big message I'd give myself.
Sweet or savoury while you're sitting at the dinner table?
This is why physical activity is so important for me, because I don't I'm like a Labrador. I'm not picky. Yeah, if it's there, I'll eat it. So it doesn't help. So that's why the physical activity is good for me, because I need to burn off what I consume.
Weekend coming up. What's an ordinary weekend look like for you?
What would be kids' sport? It would be trying to play hockey myself, if that's what you accuse me of. I'm really run around the field with a stick in my hand. I don't play it. Try and get out for a ride now, which is a little bit harder now, the weather. And then spend the rest of the time with the family. We've just built a house, so the landscaping, with my very limited skill set. So that's what a normal weekend is. And then in summer, we spend the whole time at the pool for water polo. Yeah, so that's probably it too. So.
Lastly, I think you've already answered this because you seem inspired by Rewalt, but do you have any good recommendations for us? Something you're reading, watching, listening to?
Oh, I love the Howie games, and the benefit for the walk was I would go for a 3-hour walk and I'd have that opportunity. Where now, I live in Thiguna, obviously in Lavington. No use doing a podcast because it's only 7 minutes with the traffic. But I'm going to Wagga this afternoon, so I'll tap into another podcast, the Howie games. Probably not a lot. I do love Yellowstone. Waiting for the new thing. So yeah, I try and different people to get ideas. I do educational podcasts as well and readings. But yeah, that's probably the Yellowstone and the Howie games.
There you go. 2 hot tips. Well, Matt Kean, thank you so much for coming in and being part of the journey. Hopefully this does help you spread the message.
All right, thank you very much for the opportunity. And guys, get a skin check. Now going into winter. Even if you don't need one, it might show up something you didn't know was there, and it may save your life.
There you go. Thanks very much, Matt Kean.
Thanks, Kevin.